Well, Vineyard Cincinnati Church has been a longtime partner with a global missions organization called Back to Back. Many of you are real familiar with Back to Back, founded by Todd and Beth Guckenberger. And we are thrilled and blessed that we have Beth here sharing a message with us this weekend. So we're going to watch a little video, and then we're going to invite Beth up here. And if you could, after the video, just give her a warm Vineyard welcome when she comes up to take the stage. Okay? Let's watch.
That was an awesome warm Vineyard welcome. Hi, my name is Beth, and I have such affection for this community, and I'm grateful to be here with you all this weekend. I work with Back to Back Ministries, like JR mentioned. It's an organization that works with orphaned and vulnerable children around the world, and that video highlights sponsorship relationship. We know today of the 2 billion children on the planet, that half of them, or 1 billion children, have experienced trauma or have been traumatized. And because trauma happens in relationship, it is so meaningful to me that God chooses to use the vehicle of relationship to bring healing to kids' lives. So if you are someone who've always been interested in maybe getting into a sponsorship relationship with a child, this morning down in the lobby next to the book table, we have a display of all the currently unsponsored children and all the sites where the Vineyard is investing around the world. And if that's something that's interesting to you, you should go down there and talk to them, and maybe you can begin to be in a relationship with a child where you can invest in them and give them the good words and experiences that you saw in that video. So thanks for considering that. Well, I feel like every time I'm here, I honestly feel like I just tell you people the truth about what's going on. And So here we go. Let's pray that what happens in the sanctuary stays in the sanctuary, because I'm going to be honest with you all. I'm just kidding. Go tell anybody you'd like. But this is one of my favorite weeks of the year. I really, really like the whole process of evaluating the year we've just come through and thinking ahead on the year that's to come. And I've been asking the Lord, like I hope many of you have been, like, what was this last year all about? Did I do it the way that you asked me to? Is there anything I need to take inventory of? Is there anything I need to be mindful of? Is there something you have for me in 2020 I'm not paying attention to yet that I need to be? Is there something that you're asking of me, calling me to, I can lean into? Like, what is it that's coming that I can be on alert for or listening to? And as I've been thinking through this month, I just keep hearing the same word over and over again, this idea of peace. And peace comes from the Hebrew word shalom. Shalom means like fullness, completeness, a filling in of the cracks, and I keep thinking, like, God, I've been thinking first about me, like, do you want me to be more of a person of peace? Do you want me to live more at peace with people? Do you want me to be someone who helps reconcile or broker peace? Like, what is it that you have? Like, what do I need to know about peace and what you teach me about it so that I can then reflect it in the way that I live? The idea of peace is that you have this cup, this vessel inside of you that's so full, so complete, that it's overflowing. It actually denotes or gives the idea that you can be generous as a result of the peace that you have inside of you. And I mean, yes, generous in terms of resources, but I also mean generous in spirit, which is what we'll talk about today. What does it look like? Because I don't know about you, but as I look at 2019, I think to myself, we live in a world, one, that's in chaos, definitely in need of peace, and two, that is so easily offended, right? We are so easily offended. What would it look like to have my cup be so full of God's shalom that if someone tries to offend me, all I have for them is goodness to spill out on them? The Bible talks about in Matthew 5, this idea in the Beatitudes about blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And as I was thinking about that passage in preparation for this message, I was just like, I mean, it's no accident that during the holiday season we do see an uptick in conflict, right? We do see an extra measure of the enemy's activity towards division. He wants to destroy our families. He wants to destroy those we might find ourselves with some extra discretionary time with. He wants to remind us about the things that get us all worked up about. But I'm thinking to myself, even though we were all born into the world as daughters and sons of Adam, where our flesh is easily offended and it's easier to be separated and disconnected and isolated than it is together, if you identify yourself as a Christ follower, we're now sons and daughters of him, and God's family, the way God's family works is we are peacemakers. If we are peacemakers, we'll be called children of God. And that's our new identity. We've been adopted into, grafted into God's family, and I like that language. Todd and I have a large family. A bunch of them have been entered into our family through adoption. So I understand that idea that somebody could once be born outside of our family, now be grafted into our family and identify with this way of thinking. Last night at the Ohio State game, my brother's Ethiopian kids and my Mexican kids were all cheering for Ohio State. Why? Because they've been grafted into our family. There's no reason those people should even know what a Buckeye is, right? But they're in our family, so they now look and smell like our family. My first adoption was 21 years ago. We adopted a 6-week-old little boy. When he was 14, he woke up one morning and told me that he had a stomach ache, and like the mother of the year that I was like, I think you're fine, go on to school. And then about an hour after he got to school, they called to tell me he was doubled over in pain. So I got to the school to find out what was going on. As soon as I saw him, I realized he was really sick, so we rushed to the hospital. The doctors immediately identified that he was having appendix issues, and they told me that they were going to prep an operating room and remove his appendix, and it's all good. And they gave him some medicine and put us in a little medical cubicle, and I began to fill out the 175 forms you have to do. And as I was sitting there filling out the forms, and Evan was kind of calm, about 20 minutes later, he just sits up in the gurney all of a sudden and just starts wailing at the top of his lungs. And so everybody comes rushing in to see what's going on. And the doctor said, his appendix is just ruptured. We have about 30 minutes to get this toxin out of his body. So we all go running down the hallway, and I'm running behind him. I got all my clipboards and everything. I'm like, what do you need to know? They're like, tell us his medical history. I'm like, okay, I don't do very well with anesthesia, and his paternal grandfather died of cancer, and his paternal grandmother has issues with her heart. And I'm like going through all this stuff, and Evan sits up in his gurney, and he's like, Mom, I'm adopted. I was like, oh, you're right, that's my medical history. I don't know anything about him. I don't know. I brought a picture of him to show you. Yeah, we don't even look alike, but in that moment, right? He's so fully grafted into my family because his history is my history. I mean, his future is my future. I assigned his history to be my history. And that's the way it works in God's family. When we get integrated into his family, his future is our future, his history is our history, and we are identified with him. And the way that God's family works is God's family are peacemakers. We're shalom bringers. We know God is a God of shalom. In Romans chapter 16, it says the God of peace will soon crush the enemy under his feet. In Colossians 1, it says that God made peace with us by reconciling to us to him through the cross. I mean, he's the chief reconciler. He started the whole thing by reconciling us to him, and then now sends us out as representatives of him into a world busy about his business, reconciling ourselves one to another. I mean, this is the way it works. The Bible talks about how we're part of something called the kingdom of priests. That sounds kind of strange. I'm not a priest, but I am, because a priest represents their God. And when someone interacts with a priest, they should know more about their God. God says when people interact with you, they should know more about me. So you be generous with them so they know that I am generous. Tell them this is how it works. And I figured out this year, I mean, more than just this year, but especially this year, that on my own, I don't actually have what it takes to make peace. I mean, that's even with people that I love, right? I mean, it's hard enough to make peace with like your spouse and your kids and your neighbor and your friends and your coworkers. The Bible talks about we got to make peace with people like we don't even like that are considered our enemies or who might persecute us. Like we are supposed to give of ourselves, to reconcile ourselves, to give peace and goodness to others because we first received it from him. At Back to Back, we received this letter from this guy who wrote in that said that he thought I dressed inappropriately in some of the Back to Back videos. And then I had a chance to sit down with him to reconcile. And my daughter, Aviv, was strong, right? I mean, I sat at that table and I thought to myself, I actually would be more comfortable crushing you right now. Like that's my flesh nature. Like that's the way the world works, right? You want to do things like defend yourself or crush someone, anything to make yourself feel better in a conflict. But I don't belong in this earth anymore. I've been born again. I now have another citizenship. And my family, my God family, were peacemakers. So I knew when I sat down with him, I could do two things. I could judge him or I could minister to him. And I needed to take the choice of ministry because that's the way it works. The Bible tells us in Romans chapter 12, if at all possible, as far as it depends upon you, live peaceably with all. Okay, Lord, that is a tall order for 2020. But I'm feeling excited about it. I'm feeling excited about what that might possibly mean. What I was thinking about most is when the world talks about making peace, they use words and phrases like, meet me in the middle. Let's compromise. Let's, find common ground. Let's let things just be or go. Let's just walk away as if that makes peace. But you know how, that's the world's idea of making peace, but that's not what God did. When God decided to make peace with us, he did not meet us in the middle. He did not compromise. He did not walk away. He did not let things go. When God decided to make peace with us, he came all the way. And if I'm going to be a Christ follower and be in his family, I got to be a come all the wayer. I got to be a go all the wayer to the other person at my own expense. We have this ropes course in Mexico. I lived in Mexico for 15 years among the children's homes that we serve there. And we have this ropes course, and this ropes course element, it's not that complicated. It's just two wires about knee-high length off the ground, like this far. At the beginning, the wires are about 2 feet apart, and at the end, they're 9 feet apart. And the challenge is you and a partner are to each get up on your own wire and touching nothing but each other, scoot yourself along that wire until you can get as far apart as you can, or all the way to the 9-foot mark. And the first time we opened up the element, I was hosting a group of business men and women from the city, mostly men. And I was like, this shouldn't be that hard. You're like 6 feet tall. Just lean in a little bit. You'll get all the way to the end. They got up on their wires, and they kept consistently getting halfway down and then falling off. Because what they were doing is they were bending at their waist, maintaining their own equilibrium. Their own sense of self-preservation, frankly, pushing on the other person. And when their arm span only got them so far and they couldn't go any farther, they just stepped off, and nobody, no harm, no foul, although they did not get all the way to the end. And the guy who designed it came over to watch us for a few minutes, and I was not shy with telling him, this is a bad element. It doesn't even work. Nobody can get to the end of this thing. And I think we need to scoot him in a little bit. And he goes, no, it works. He goes, do you want to know the secret? And I was like, yeah, like a half an hour ago, I wanted to know the secret. And he goes, here's what you got to do. You got to tell everybody to stop thinking about themselves, to spend all their energy thinking about the other person on the other side, to lean so far into them that if the other person moves or wobbles or falls off, they're going to fall and get hurt, but they're not going to consider their own needs. They're going to consider instead the needs of the other one, and the other person's going to do the same thing. And if they do that, they're going to be leaning in so far that they could fall they could fall. But if they trust each other and they lean into each other, they're going to get all the way to the end. And as I gave those new instructions to our teams, every pair consistently, one after another, got all the way to the end. And I was watching them do it, and I was doing exactly what they want you to do in a ropes course. I was thinking about the metaphor of all the people in life that I stand up across the wire from, and all the ways in which it's so much easier to pretend you're still on the wires, but you get only so far in the relationship, and then you take care of yourself and your own needs first, and you step off before it gets real hard. And I was thinking about my mothering relationships and my husband relationship and my coworkers' relationships and my friends' relationships. And I was thinking, my gosh, Jesus, you are a come all the wayer. You're a lean in all the wayer. Like, what does it look like for me to be a peacemaker all the way this year? Like, what does that look like? Because the world tells us to peace keep. That's not the good kind. Here's what peacekeepers do. And if anyone wants to say an amen, I'll feel a little bit better up here. But when I peacekeep, here's what I do when I peacekeep. I do things like avoid, withdraw, deny, cover up, kind of take one for the team. Or I might do something like control or fix or shame or intimidate or attack or squelch. Anything to make the problem go away. The byproduct of living like that, of being a peacekeeper where it looks okay on the outside, but it's not really okay on the inside, is things like resentment and distance and passive aggressiveness and hurt and surface level relationships. When we say out loud with our mouth, it's all good, but inside we're not thinking, it's all good, you're peacekeeping. And that does not look like the way Jesus is. Instead, he asks us to be a peacemaker, and a peacemaker at their very core understands that life is actually a struggle. And there's going to be natural opportunities for two people on two different sides of a fence or two different ways of thinking to come together. And in that moment, when you come together, you have an opportunity to have a love offensive, to ruthlessly pursue somebody else in love. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's actually the presence of righteousness. It's a truth-telling kind of thing. It's understanding if I withhold truth, I'm never actually going to get to know you. Todd's always saying to people, especially at work, there's like 5% of conversations that never get said, and it's kind of the most critical 5%. And when you don't say that 5%, like little tiny problems become eventually much bigger problems. Like peacemakers stay in the conversation until everything gets said. They're willing to risk their own comfort. Like God reconciled with us so we would have this really full cup, so we could give it away to others. And whatever they do with what it is we give them, that's between them and Jesus. We get in trouble when we get all these expectations that come with it. We always say in my household, in my marriage, the expectations, they're like premeditated resentments. Like, you know what I'm talking about, right? You know, like if you're in conflict with someone, what do we know right away? That person is at least hurt, probably confused. What better opportunity is there for ministry than that? I've started to do some inventory this month. Look back in my 2019 year and just ask the Lord, is there anybody that when they come to my mind, I kind of do that little internal cringe? Like, I don't really know if I dealt with that the way I should have. I don't really know if I want to see that person again. Anybody have any of those things? Maybe in your life, if you look back in 2019, you have some big conflict that comes to mind. But you also might have some little slights, little offenses, little things that kind of disconnected you from someone. I want you to put that person in your mind because I've traveled to Israel a couple of times, and the first time I went in 2010, I got this teaching that has changed over the last decade the way that I see conflict resolution or peacemaking. It's this idea behind a sulha. So sulha literally means, it's an ancient word, it means meeting together at the table of reconciliation. In a typical human conflict, What happens is the person that did the wrong thing is expected to go to the person they did the wrong thing to and apologize. And then that person has the right to decide if they did it good enough, fast enough, if they're over it, and if they're going to enter into a relationship. That's the way the world works, and it doesn't work very often. Because usually the person that asked the apology doesn't do it right, and the person that wanted the apology didn't like the way it happened, or maybe it doesn't even happen that way, and relationships are broken all over the place. That's why we're in the state of chaos we're in. Imagine with me for a minute that JR, who just hosted us earlier in the service, let's imagine he and I are in a big fight, which quick disclaimer, we are definitely not in a fight. But for my analogy, let's imagine we're in a fight and we'll make it all my fault because I'm up here and he's not. In a typical relationship, he would want me to come make it right with him, but maybe I don't even know I did anything to him. Just things started to get awkward. Or maybe we all know what I just did. Yep, I did it. But he started it. If you know him the way I know him, you know he deserved it, right? Sometimes we justify our choices, our words, our actions because we think the person that we mistreated deserves the way that we treated them. Or sometimes, hey buddy, get in line. I've hurt 10 people this month. I'm not going to fix it with you more than I am fixing it with anybody else. I'm hurting. For all kinds of reasons, I might not have what it takes to go and give it to him, an apology in a way he might want to receive it. And so these relationships stay broken. And you know what? If it only impacted JR and I, there's 7 billion other people on the planet I can be in relationship with. But hear this, if you hear nothing else this morning, conflict is like cancer and it eats healthy things around it. And it will not stay isolated to JR and I, because pretty soon I'm over here teaching some Wednesday night class, and I just use as an antidote a little story about someone who once hosted me at a church service who was involved in the stewardship of the church, and you all know exactly who I'm talking about. And before I'm all done, you're on Team Beth. And then you guys are in some kind of situation where you're around JR and you hear him share about that lady, the blonde lady likes orphans that come sometimes, and you hear what he said, I did, and you're on Team JR. And then you guys find yourself serving at the healing center or at the hospitality or in some place, and you realize you're on 2 different sides of something that actually has nothing to do with you, and you have emotion for it. And this is how churches split. This is how families fall apart. People get all wrapped up in stuff that has nothing to do with them. And God wrote this whole other way for reconciliation to happen. It's called a sulha, and I'm going to give you a couple examples from Genesis to Revelation. It literally means that instead of the person who did the wrong thing getting themselves all cleaned up and going back to grovel to the person they did the wrong thing to, just like everything else Jesus says upside down, it's the person that's been hurt that takes the initiation. It's the person who gets what they need, their cup full from the Lord, so they have something to give to someone else. It would be the JR coming to initiate with me who did the wrong thing to him, offering some kind of food or drink. And when the person who gets offered the food and drink receives it, it's like JR is saying to me, that which Beth did against me, I'm going to hold against her no longer, and now anybody else watching can't either. There's a story about a Palestinian and a Jewish family where one of them hit and killed the 13-year-old deaf son of the other family. And instead of the war that could have created in those communities, the family that lost the son invited the driver to come and sit at their table, and they offered him a cup of coffee, announcing to him and everyone else watching that which he did against their family, they will hold against him no longer. It was in the New York Times. It made international news. It's not the way the world works. Imagine with me the story of Jacob. This is in Genesis chapter 54. Jacob liked this girl named Rachel. He went to the father-in-law named Laban and said, can I marry her? He said, work for me for 7 years, and then yes. He did. 7 years later, Laban goes, nope, you can't have Rachel, you can have the sister. He gave him the sister instead, made him work 7 more years for the girl he really wanted. 14 years later, Jacob gets the girl he likes. He's the one that's been wronged, tricked by that father-in-law Laban, who's the one that did the wrong thing. It says in Genesis 54 and 55 that Jacob goes off into the hills with his family, now twice as many people as he wants. Laban goes up after them. If we were watching this show, this reality television show on our couches in our living room, and we saw Laban chasing up after Jacob after 14 years of indentured servitude, we'd be saying on our couches to the television, Jacob, turn around and give that man a piece of your mind. But if he had done that, what would happen? And Jacob and all of his family, they would have heard him give a piece of his mind to Laban, and then the rest of their life they would have been defined by that which happened against them. Do you know anyone? Are you someone who have defined yourself, identified yourself by that which happened against you? God has this other way, this beautiful freedom way. Instead, it says that Jacob went out and killed a fattened calf and he offered it to Laban. He was telling everyone in his family and Laban himself, that which you've done against us, we're going to hold against you no longer. Now Jacob's family can go live the life that God has for them, free. Think about the story of Joseph, coat of many colors, sold into slavery by his brothers. Right? All those years later, after he rose in power in Egypt, those brothers experiencing a famine come to Egypt. Joseph sees them, they're racked with guilt for what they had done to their little brother and to their father. Joseph could have given him a piece of your mind. You know what it was like to be a slave in Egypt? But he offered them a sulha. He had shalom he got from God. He had fullness. He had all his cracks filled. And from the goodness of his heart, he gave what they needed, that grain offering to them. Now that family's free to live the way God planned for them. Think about the prodigal son, right? He went and asked his dad for his money, goes off and squanders it in all the places we know he does. Those people would have lived in common purse, so the whole community would have really been mad at that boy for taking their money. When he comes back, that dad runs to him. And that dad, the one that had been wronged, doesn't hold it against him, goes off and kills that fattened calf, announcing to that boy and all the rest of the community, what he's done against us, we'll hold against him no longer. Think about, well, first of all, this is why I think Jesus was always eating with tax collectors and sinners. I think he was offering sulhas all the time. I think he was freeing people all the time from what they had done against him. Think about Peter. Peter denied Christ 3 times. Definitely the guy that did the wrong thing. But God doesn't get stuck in a day when we do the wrong thing. He's not thinking to himself like, man, I did not see that coming. He was looking at Peter when he denied him 3 times. He's thinking, in 50 days, I have a plan that you're going to be part of something called the Day of Pentecost, and we're going to add 3,000 people to the church. I need you to get back in the game. So he invited him to a beach, and on that beach, he offered him some fish. And he was announcing to Peter and all the rest of the disciples, that which Peter's done against me, I'm going to hold against him no longer. And now neither can you. This is the heart of a father. I think this is why heaven's always depicted like a wedding feast. Isaiah 25 talks about on the mountain we're going to eat the finest of wines and the richest of meats. He's going to wipe away every tear from our faces. I mean, it's like, it's not going to be anybody's cup of coffee, that sulha we have with him one day. So go with me to the scene of the Last Supper, right? The night before Jesus died. The year the Lord died, it happened to fall on something called the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. They did that because leaven represented sin, so they made bread without leaven, like representing a sacrifice that would come one day without sin. But it's not here yet. So the head of the household would take the corner of that bread, they called that the afikomen, and he would hide that, and they would have their meal, and at the end of the meal, if there were any kids, they would task the kids with finding the hidden afikomen. If they didn't have any kids, the head of the household would come out with that afikomen, and he would rip it in pieces, that bread, and he'd give a little piece to everybody at the table. So what's that look like to us right now? Like communion, right? Jesus was there at the night of the Last Supper, and he holds up the bread without leaven, and he rips off the afikomen, and he holds it up, and he says, what? Hey, this is my body. It's been broken for you. Now when you do this, you're going to do it in remembrance of me. I'm the one long waited for. I am the one without sin, and I am not waiting for you to get yourself all together to come to me. Instead, I'm going to tell you something. It says in Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, here I am, says Jesus. I'm standing at your door and knocking. I'm coming to you. Because our relationships with God breaks in all the ways our relationships with men break. Like sometimes we don't even know what happened, just starts to get kind of awkward and distant. We find ourselves separated from God. Sometimes we think he started it. Sometimes we're just in a bad place. We're hurting everybody, including God. But God doesn't look at us and go, well, when you get it all figured out, come back and grovel to me and I'll decide if it's good enough. Instead, he says, I stand at your door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I'm going to come in and eat with him and he with me. He's talking about this sulha. He's saying to you, you know what? I'm coming all the way for you. I'm coming all the way to you to make peace. I'm going to reconcile myself to you. Now when you take this bread, you're going to have a chance this morning to take bread. There'll be communion stations here, down front, and in the balcony. When you take this bread, he's saying to you, that which you have done against me, I'm going to hold against you no longer. Get back in the game. I've got big plans for you next year. And if you get your heart full of that message, if shalom enters, peace enters your heart, and you're like when I take communion, I say to the Lord, I want the whole thing. I want a whole measure of love and joy. I want a whole measure of peace and patience and goodness, self-control. I want a whole measure of wisdom and mercy. I want everything you have for me. Like, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. Fill me up, fill me up. I'm so grateful you initiate with me. I'm so grateful you come to me. If you get all that, imagine what the Lord's thinking when you're like, man, I got something against that guy this year. Cannot believe he did that. And if that person that came to your mind earlier is outside of God's family, this is the best way I know for you to demonstrate to them that you are now a child of God. This is your family. Our family, we're reconcilers. We're shalom bringers. We're peacemakers. This is what our family does. Let me give to you what you don't deserve, because I was first given to me what I did not deserve. I'm going to be a kingdom of priests and represent that way to you. If you forgive someone that you think doesn't deserve it, watch how curious they're going to be about the hope that you have. And if the person that came to your mind is inside of our family, it doesn't make any sense to Jesus. He told us from the very beginning the way that they're going to know that we are different is the way that we love each other. Like, we have got to be lovers of people, focused on the gift that God gave us. I want to close with this word. I can't stop thinking about it. I just learned it, and I can't stop talking about it. It's this word in Hebrew for to love, which is ahava, means to love. The reason I like this word so much is because embedded in ahava, embedded in that word, is the root word ahav, which means to give. So imagine that God put inside this idea of loving, giving. God so loved the world, he gave us his only son. When you love someone, you give them. What do you give them? You give them your presence. You give them words, experiences, forgiveness, peace. You give them your prayers. Like you give of yourself to the people that you love. That's how they know you've demonstrated your love for them. I've been thinking about this like crazy, how much God loves us and how he's demonstrated himself towards us. Anyway, I was talking about this a couple weeks ago, and this guy raised his hand. He's like, hey, I was just at a Jewish wedding, and the rabbi was talking about ahava, and he said the way that you say it is you hold that last syllable, that last AH, as long as you can until you don't have any more breath in you. And it's to represent that you're to love and to give and to love and to give and to love and to give until you are literally out of breath, until you have nothing left inside of you. So I wanted to close this morning, Vineyard family, with a little exercise. I'm going to count to 3, and I want you to take a deep breath. Because we're going to say this word in closing together, ahava, and as you hold that last syllable out, I want you to hold it as long as you have breath in you, and I want you to close your eyes and have a conversation with the Lord. And ask him, is there someone that you want me to love and give and make peace with in this year? And then commit to him, you'll do it until you're literally out of breath. That's not the way the world works. I can't think of any better way walking into 2020 for you to tell the world you've been born again. And I'll close this in prayer. 1, 2, 3. Ahava. Oh, Jesus, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that you first made peace with us. I'm grateful for the way that you came to us. You found us while we were yet sinners. You initiated with us, and we responded and are still responding. We respond to the good gift that you've given us of things like forgiveness and joy and peace and patience and wisdom and mercy and guidance We need all of that in full measure for the year to come. We have no idea what's ahead for us, but what we know is we need fullness in you, completeness in you, shalom in you. Lord Jesus, make it real. And Lord, help us to see all the opportunities we have in our life to look like you to the people around us, to those inside of our family and out. May we be marked not by how we defend ourselves or how we articulate ourselves. May we be marked by how we demonstrate our love for others, because we are grasping increasingly daily what it feels like to be loved by you. So Jesus, I pray with the authority that we have together as co-heirs as your children, and I ask that you would release an anointing on the Vineyard community, that as they leave this church today and they go out into the world, that people would want to know, what is your family like? What's the reason for the hope that you have? And then give us words to say it, Lord. Make us your priests representing you in this lost world. And we pray that you do it increasingly so. We'll be obedient to it. And I pray these things in your holy and precious name. Amen. This morning, you'll have a chance to have prayer teams up forward and communion. I encourage you to take advantage of those opportunities. Thank you.